Before the next poem, I have to tell you a story that relates to this, because the next poem is a poem about a song, and in turn it's a poem about another poet. It must have been 15 years ago or so, one very early morning, which was very unusual for me to come to work early in the morning. But one very early morning, it was storming, there was just sheets of water coming down, and as I approached CAS from the south side on Olentangy River Road, just as I got to the Fawcett Center, the north edge of the Fawcett Center, I saw a dead hen duck lying right beside the road in a puddle. It was a mallard hen. And it was almost impossible to see. I was driving very, very slowly, and I saw the dead duck lying there. And then I turned in on that side road between Fawcett Center and CAS. And the parking lot was almost totally empty at that time, but it was just a sheet of water. And I pulled my car in, and as I turned around, I saw this mallard drake just running frantically around and quacking and quacking and quacking. Now, the other part of this story, just at the moment that I approached the Fawcett Center, I had been listening to WOSU, classical music. And one of my favorite songs in all the world came on. The song called Wanderers Nachtlied, the Wayfarer's Night Song, a poem by Goethe, whom David told us all was indeed the last polymath. And just as different parts of that poem were being sung was when I saw the dead duck, and then when I pulled into the parking lot and saw this mallard quacking desperately with all of the flood. I want to read this tiny poem in German and, of course, translate it, because the lyrics, as they're being sung, are in German, and they're being sung by the greatest tenor of my lifetime, Jussi Björling, the great Swedish tenor, who Anne and I both grew up with, in a sense, in terms of our going to opera and listening to opera especially. And the recording that I heard that morning was sung by Jussi Björling. It's the exact recording that I'm going to play for you in a moment, but I need to prepare you with the words. I've already said that it's the Wanderers Nachtlied. Actually, it's the second one of that title by Goethe. It starts out a picture of the evening. Über allen Gipfeln ist Ruhe. Over all the hilltops, over all the mountaintops, all is quiet, all is peace, all is calm. In allen Wipfeln, in all the treetops, spürest du, you perceive, you feel, you can hear, Kaum, einen, Hauch, hardly a breath of air. I don't know how else to translate that word, Hauch. No breath of air. Die Vögelein schweigen im Walde. The little birds grow silent in the forest. Warte nur. Just wait. Balde, soon. Ruhest, auch. You also shall find peace. You also shall find rest. And so I would like to play this recording for you so that you can get some sense of the emotional milieu in which I went to work that morning.
Oh
because it's so short, I'd like to play it one more time so that you really have this whole sense of this feeling, the feeling of this piece in your minds. Oh, I pressed the wrong button. There. As I said, the music was by Franz Schubert, and I'm mindful of the fact that by the time Schubert was my present age, he had been dead for nearly 45 years. So this is one of those horrible things in history. Well, I titled my poem, in reference to the Wanderer's Nachtlied, I titled mine Wanderer's Morgenlied, the Wayfarer's morning song. But it describes the experience I just told you. Jussi Björling sings to me of falling night with Goethe's words and Schubert's song. I drive to work in driving rain that sweeps the road and slows me near to stop. Über allen Gipfeln ist Ruhe. The roar of morning traffic drains away into the blinding, drenching torrent that makes my morning dark as dusk. In allen Wipfeln spürest du, Kaum, einen, Hauch. A breathless, broken, feathered form lies still beside the busy road. Kaum, einen, Hauch. Her torn out feathers float away on puddling waters by the burn. I leave the roadway sad in silence to find the tar-black parking lot, now turned into a shallow sea that streams in sheets and flows away inchoate and disordered and confused. Die Vögelein schweigen in Walde. A mallard drake is dashing back and forth, searching aimless in the flood before me, quacking with a passion known to all who've lost a love. His cries resound from tarmac to the trees, he cannot stop, nor can he find surcease from sorrow on this mournful morn. Warte nur, Balde, Balde, ruhest, auch. Each duckish cry brings forth a tear. I weep aloud like one whose wounds will never, ever heal, whose grief will never end, till blood no longer courses in his brain. The desolation of the duck, his grief, engulfs me as I sink into a silence that dilates to reach infinities of cosmic time and endless space. Warte nur, Balde, Balde, ruhest, auch. I mentioned Hazel Swart, and I mentioned what a wonderful poet she was. By the way, she dropped dead one day in her classroom in the middle of what everybody said was a really great lecture. One of the poems she wrote was actually to me. I don't remember what the occasion was, but she wrote this and she actually published it in a journal. It's called Tribute to a Scholar. Now this is really over the top stuff, I have to warn you. She really is heaping incredible flattery upon me. But I think in some little things here she really indeed did understand who I was and what I was trying to be. There's one thing I need to mention. It talks about me being naked and alone. This is not what you think. Sure. She's talking about me being naked before the universe, essentially. That there's nothing between me, and she's relating me to every man. That there is no buffer between us and the cruelties and so on of the real world. So as I said, this is called Tribute to a Scholar. Oh, one other thing I need to tell you. Every Tuesday night when I was a professor, I had an open house. And it was open to students and faculty, visiting hitchhikers, Black Panthers, whatever. It was quite a thing. And quite often, I would play the piano at these little things where once in a while I'd actually get out my accordion and play a polka or something like that. And many of the older faculty, including Hazel, loved to get up and dance when I would be playing a polka. And so she kind of alludes to the music of the man, me, in other words. So it has both a literal significance, but also a more symbolic or allegorical meaning. I would like to explain the music of the man, how the instrument of his mind, seizing on everything, plucks out the form, the harmony, the tone, sets the dull charges of an atom mote, dancing bohemian polkas, Polish polonaises, in fire steps and easy silver sliding. His music follows me, breaks through hushed intervals, in quivering, spangled frenzies, half man, half God. I hear him wrestling with his own mortality. Naked, alone, his bronze gold energy pitted restlessly against all time, he holds the conflict with Wagnerian force and always with poignancy. The red-winged blackbirds fluttering through the reeds swing on the cat-tailed edges of a pond. World without end. Water and the sun transfix the boy. The nesting plovers run through grassy fields. The sibilant insect notes lull the noon eyes to sleep, subtle as bronze. To yellow dreaming, hammocked in downed content. Yet the plaintive cry, full spaced and clear, rings tremulous, still, and sad. Killdeer, killdeer, killdeer. She was very much into nature. She lived out in the country and was very, very attuned to the biological seasons, if you will. She was not a scientist, but she was extremely well read in science. She was very interested in science, and she was very fascinated by human evolution. And she read all of the popular and even some really semi-popular things on that subject. And she wrote this poem on human evolution. It's called Every Boy. And this was a poem that I wanted to set to music. I never quite finished it. I had set it for contralto voice, piano accompaniment, French horn, and cello. I got involved in some very complicated counterpoint problems that I never solved. And so, unfortunately, it's another has-been moment. But the poetry itself is really very nice. Every boy. His lineage, cell by cell, traces of tepid seas, trails out of memory into millennial time. And the miracle of him, after all the myriad happenings, the billions of sun circlings, moon waxings, and moon wanings, the ages of patient, puny crawling, snail-paced, interminable, to here, where now he stands, keen-eyed, erect, alert, loving and loved, precariously balanced, presently, between mists of his mute beginnings and mists of his destiny. Oblivious of the sheer unlikelihood that he should now exist, he wipes away some salt tears from his eyes, a living substance of the filtered past. Hand over hand, he spans the jungle gym, and in his time will move a bit more close to star explosions and his origins. A last poem that she wrote that I tried to set to music, in this case again for contralto, but with clarinet and cello and piano. And this I sort of finished, but it really wasn't good enough to justify going with this wonderful poem. We have come again to an ancient sorrow, is the way she titled it. The rains have rained September away, and the summer away, and the proud young hawk away from the milky mists that feather asparagus further and bead the thick grasses. It is not enough that the sun tomorrow will pour like honey on the hills and the leaves. Tilted north by northwest in time's great hollow, we have come again to an ancient sorrow. The days will shrivel and the nights will freeze. The rains will rain the mountains away and the meadows away and the pliable flesh away from the calcium bone. And oh, the pity of so much beauty washed down the dark streams of such a godless heaven. I said she lived in the countryside, and she loved all of the wild animals that we have there, including things that are a bane of cattlemen and horse riders, woodchucks. And she wrote this poem, Twice I Will Love the Spring. Yesterday, half grown, shining with sun, he ate the winter salt mid-road. We watched him run back to his field and vault a grassy dish and roll all fur and scuttles back to his fresh dug hole in the slope's green quiet. Today, first spring, budding to sun, I saw his soft fur shine on the lily sprouts that run over the shoulder line. And when again, at 4, his little mound of fur was fixed still, at that hour, I knew he would not stir. Tomorrow, green leaves opening more, will make a beauty grow one little life before, never again will know. Twice will I love the spring, where lily beds will be. Tenderly first, for him. Recklessly then, for me. I think this is the last, no, this one. As I said, she was a teacher and she died with her boots on, as they say. This is called The Teacher to His Students on Ultimates. Do you presume that at the podium, facing your bursting egos, ill-contained, they flower in an arrogance of speech or light bespangled glitter through the eyes? Do you presume behind the podium we cringe before the questions that you ask and have no honest answers for reply, or lure you to convictions you reject, or play the god, the despot, the high priest? Wearing the springtime flowers in your hair, you love and dream and sing impetuously, assuming all the passions you endure are missing in our sad anemia. Believe me, we are masters of disguise, artists of sweet illusion and deceit. We hide our withered blossoms from your eyes, cover the bitter knowledge of defeat, so that a little longer you may be young gods and catch, at least in reverie, your single glimpse of immortality. We did not choose to say. Time, water, sunshine, golden sands, sift through the fingers of soft hands which also perish, drift away to cosmic darkness and black decay. That once, young gods, we wrestled too and lost. In such an anguish new, torrential centuries of rains could not dissolve the fuchsia stains our injured souls have bled since we were wounded with mortality. We stand diminished, but we know. All knowledge is medicinal. Any direction you may go must be at last recessional. And in death's pure democracy, all will be nothing equally. I next want to read a poem called The Deathbed of Mary Louise Williams. Mary Louise Williams was my junior year English teacher, American literature, in high school. And she also nominated me and successfully got for me a scholarship to spend a summer between my junior and senior years of high school in Northwestern University, studying debate and speech. She looked ancient when I was in her class, and I just assumed she would be retiring shortly after I graduated. Many years later, I moved to Columbus, and in the early 80s, I did quite a few radio interviews on WOSU with Fred Anderley's predecessor, whose name I'm not sure whether it was Stavitsky or what it was, but there were actually two predecessors of Fred Anderley, and both of them repeatedly had me on to do programs. This was, I'm pretty sure, the very first such program that I had done at WOSU, and it was a 2-hour-long call-in talk show. And we got to the very end of the second hour, and there was time for one last question. And the phone rang, or well, we were patched through, and this voice came over the line. Can there be more than one Frank Zindler in the world? I remember many years ago when I was a teacher, I had a student named Franz, Zindler, a very bright boy, who graduated first in his class. And before she could get any further, I said, Mary Louise Williams? And she kind of giggled, yes. Well, I almost fell apart. You can't imagine, because I thought she was dead. And here she was calling in. And I was just flabbergasted, and I wrote a note to the host saying, keep her on, don't let her go, I've got to talk with her privately. So he did, he signaled the engineer to keep her on the line. And so, somehow I managed to get through that final question, whatever it was she had. It was something like, why are flowers pretty, or something like that. It was you know, that I really had a hard time keeping my composure. And so after I got to talk with her, I found out where she was living, I got her phone number. And I had to go out of town the very next day, so I couldn't see her right away. And this was towards Christmas time. And I was trying to figure out how I could get to see her, but there was no way I could do it right then. So I got her address and all of this, and I said, well, I will come to see you as soon as I get back in town. So I got back, and it was now very close to Christmas. And I called her up. Oh, excuse me. Before I left the studio, I got to the one remaining florist that was open, and I ordered her a dozen roses to be delivered. She was living at West Community Village on the west end of Fifth Avenue down on the Riverside Drive.
Dad,
Yes.
you might remind everybody that you went to school in Michigan.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, I went to school in Michigan. So imagine her calling me up here in Ohio. I didn't know that she actually was originally from Ohio, and then had moved back here and had signed in at the ground level for that retirement home. So I sent the roses. I got back in town, and I went out to West Community Village, First Community Village, it's called First Community Village. And she was living in a duplex. These were completely independent living for retirees. And I knocked on the door, and she came. Well, she was carrying a cane, but she looked exactly the same as I had seen her 35 years before. It was unbelievable how much she looked the same, except she had this cane. And it turned out she had fallen and injured herself, and now had to have a cane. But anyway, she was very magisterial and imperious, as always when I was her student. I had hardly gotten in the door, and she's with her cane pointing, look at that table over there. And I looked into the other room. There was a drum table, and the flowers were there. The roses were there. And so I thought, wow, this is really something. They've held up well. You know, I thought maybe that's what she wanted me to look at. So I'm looking at the roses, and I said, wow, I'm glad they held up. And with her cane, she said, look at this. And there was cards, Christmas cards, standing on the table. So I just picked up one. No, this one. She says, so I picked up this Christmas card, and I looked at the childish scribble signature on it. It was the Christmas card I had sent her at Christmas in 1955. And she had kept it all those years. The story gets more extraordinary. I mean, that's just the beginning. So I was very flattered, of course. And she lived about 3 years after that, but her decline was quite rapid. And she had no family except a sister who was an opera singer who died, I think, the very first year that we were reunited. And so Miss Williams was entirely alone, and I was her only contact. And I'd often go over to read poetry to her. She knew them all by heart anyway, but she liked to do choral reading with me, or in her case, choral memorization or remembering. But when they read the will, I was just astounded. She left me $20,000 in her will. Now again, I know what you're thinking. Well, yeah, I mean, if you were her everything during the last 2 years of her life, who else would she give it to, right? No. She wrote me in the will in, I think, 1966 or 67, that I had made that much of an impression on her, apparently. So I inherited all of her personal effects. And it took me about a year to go through all of these things. I threw away almost all of the stuff, but I had to look at everything first. And I came across a box of like essay papers or something like that. But they were in her handwriting. And as I'm going through them, all of a sudden, I find one of my essays that she had copied by hand to keep a copy of all those years. And I've always said that Miss Williams was the one who made me a writer, but perhaps more important, a public speaker too. And when she died, it was really a pretty horrible ending. I'll spare you the details, but this poem, The Deathbed of Mary Louise Williams, captures the essence of that experience. I've gone to the nursing home. I heard you sobbing before I came into your room. They put you in your bed with railings up, and you are trapped. You see me, and you stretch your arms to me, and you cry. Opened wide in agony, your mouth reveals they didn't give you back your teeth. Perhaps they couldn't. The aides have left your room. They do not understand. They dare not care. You clutch my hand with your frail fingers. No hiding now, the hand that has no thumb. You cry, you moan, you try to talk. You, who taught me 30 years ago the skill to speak in public, are rendered speechless now and dumb. Somewhere inside your brain an artery renounced its ordination. Now a mordant tongue strains fame to speak. You implore me without words to understand that I alone can save you. You berate me with your frown, because I do not know what it might be that I can do to save you. Your grief seems not to end, and I can't guess what I should say, or fathom what to do. I find the nurse's stubby pencil and a tablet, so you may write the words you cannot say. You grasp the pencil and attack the paper. Slowly and with labor, words appear. There's nobody. Not even I exist. I leave the flowers by your bed. I kiss you on the forehead, and I slip away.